Welcome to the Shock Your Potential podcast with your host, Michael Sherlock. We all have potential, but sometimes we need inspiration to get us to our peak performance. Whether you are starting out in your career, ready to move up the corporate ladder, or taking the leap into entrepreneurship, Michael's guests provide powerful tools and resources to shock your potential. Shock Your Potential is a global professional development training company committed to your unique journey. Learn more about us today at shockyourpotential.com. Listen in to today's expert.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Shock Your Potential. And as always, and never failing, I am your host, Michael Sherlock. No, that has not changed. You're stuck with me if you're still following this podcast. And all month long in May, we're talking about Mindful May, being mindful of ourselves, how we take care of ourselves mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And my guest today has a background that is going to speak to several of you in particular. So if you've ever faced anything that she's going to talk about, I know she's going to have some solutions for you that are going to allow you to see maybe some hope. So Elisabeth Kristof is an expert in using applied neurology to move people out of pain, unwanted behavior, and stress response. And we've been talking a lot about stress response so far this month. She's the founder of Brain-Based Wellness, which is a revolutionary online platform that trains the nervous system and body to, get this, resolve old patterns, improve performance, and increase well-being. And we do know that the central nervous system plays a huge role in how we feel and how we're able to show up. So here's a couple of the, reasons that she actually knows her stuff here. She's a certified applied neurology practitioner. She's been in the fitness and movement industry for many, many years. And she currently works with entrepreneurs, athletes, leaders, and creatives to improve resilience. Also a big catchphrase this month for us. Manage stress, which we know we've been talking about, and regulate those emotions that might guide us, maybe not the way we want to go. And doing so, she helps us work through intentional, science-based brain training. And her research and work with hundreds of clients has taught her that healing and change must occur not just in the mind, but also in the body. And that each body, mind, and nervous system is absolutely unique. And most importantly, with the right tools, we are all capable of healing. And I know you're going to talk to a lot of people who listen, who may sometimes suffer in silence. So I know you're going to have great opportunities to share with them. So Elisabeth, thank you so much for joining me this month, especially.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here. And I'm just really excited to speak with you today.
I have a really good friend who has a lot of central nervous system pain and disorders. And it's amazing to me that sometimes she functions. I mean, she's an incredibly talented person. She's a highly productive entrepreneur, but I'll tell you, there are days when I know she just barely can move. And I know people that are kind of in the spectrum of that. So I know your information, your story is going to be really incredible. So I just gave some of the highlights from your bio, but tell us a little bit more about you, your story, which really got you passionate about this, and a little bit about how you help your clients to shock their potential.
Yes, I would love to. And, like your friend, I just really believe we all do the best that we can at the level of our nervous system. And our body is always speaking to us. It's really our best ally, right? We think our body is out to get us, but really it's trying to ensure our survival, and everything that it's doing, it does for a reason. And it sends us these signals quietly. And then if we ignore them and keep pushing through, the signals have to get louder until we start to make the changes that allow us to re-regulate ourselves and take care of ourselves in the way that we need in order to ensure our health and our survival. So how I really got to a place where I see all of that and why I'm so passionate about it is from the experiences in my own life. Like you said, I've been in the movement industry for a long time. I was an entrepreneur always. That was just who I was meant to be. And so I had a health and movement studio from 2007 until about 2018. And I worked in the world of small business where you put everything you have into your business. We ended up having 2 studios, a national teacher training program, an online platform. And my whole world was teaching mindful movement and mindfulness. But at the same time, I was really disconnected from my own body. I was constantly pushing past my own threat responses and really lived in a deep state of workaholism, trying to ensure my safety and my worth and my survival from the success of my business, and living in a state of pretty severe nervous system dysregulation that I just wasn't aware of it at the time, but it came out in ways of working myself into the ground. And then I would shut down in total exhaustion. Maybe I would get a migraine, or I would experience episodes where I would binge eat, or I would experience pain in my body. But training as an athlete, I would just push right on through that. And in 2014, when we started developing our teacher training program, we knew we wanted the brain to be at the center of our movement training methodology. At this point, I knew enough about movement science through my education that I knew that our brain is really what controls everything, right? We don't have a tight hip flexor. We have a brain that is telling our hip flexor to be tight. We don't have a frozen shoulder. We have a brain that is keeping our shoulder frozen. There's not a tiny little muscle in there, a tiny little brain inside the muscle. It's all coming from this central system. And there's a language going back and forth between the body and the brain. And that if we don't address the brain and the nervous system, you can't make those changes in the body. Our strength comes from how much strength our brain allows our muscles to have. All of that comes from the brain. So I started studying applied neurology with an institute in Arizona called Z Health Performance, and really using it at that point in my life for athletic performance and pain reduction, understanding that pain comes from the brain and also performance comes from the brain, and training the central nervous system to reduce deficits, to heal problems in the visual system or the balance system inside of your inner ear or in your body mapping system, that those deficits are making your brain feel threatened because it's not getting high quality information, and it needs that information to make predictions in order to generate an output to keep you alive. So if I can give better input to your brain through your eyes, through your balance system, through the mechanoreceptors in your joints, then your brain feels safer on a second by second basis. And it will allow you to have better range of motion. It'll allow you to have more strength. It will allow you to, move more quickly. And so all of that comes from your brain's sense of safety. Your brain is always trying to decide safe or unsafe. And if it's in protective mode, you can't also be in performance mode. And so I started to really understand all of that then. But it wasn't until my life took another turn that I started to really understand it's not just our athletic performance that's driven by our nervous system. It's also our behavior. It's our experience of the whole world. We have this miraculous, intelligent system inside of us, but we're not taught how the system works and how, if we change the input coming into the system, we can experience a different output, and that our brain and our nervous system are plastic. They're always changing. And we have some agency in what direction they change depending on the stimulus that we provide. So what happened was that we were growing the business, but it was really built on a foundation of extreme workaholism, exertion, exhaustion. And as I started to train my own nervous system, I started to wake up and understand that, and start to want to move out of these cycles of exertion, exhaustion. And as I stopped pushing myself into those same places, some of the structure of the business began to fall apart. And there were just things about it that weren't sustainable, and the business partnership dissolved. And for somebody who puts all of their identity and all of their worth into a business, that was extremely scary and extremely painful for me, to lose my community, to lose this thing that I'd built up for so long, and to really not know who I was without it. And then that the very same week, actually, I dissolved my business partnership. My partner that I was living with, my romantic partner, was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer around his heart. And I went into being a full-time caretaker for him and managing that stress. And if you've been through cancer treatment with someone, it's very intense. You never feel safe. You never feel like things are going to be okay. You just don't know. And there's lots of emergencies and living in the hospital for weeks at a time and very little sleep. And my own nervous system became extremely dysregulated. And I started to have times where my binge eating got very severe. I would be in complete shutdown. I would be so fatigued that I couldn't even like make it to the bedroom. Sometimes I would just pass out on the floor. And I started to recognize the signals in myself of threat response that I saw in my clients when I was pushing them into threat response and training. And I started to understand that there were signals that my body was giving me that I was under too much stress. And my partner also had a background of PTSD and was experiencing a lot of autoimmune after the cancer surgery. And I was trying to understand what was happening for him and his PTSD episodes. And so I started a deep dive of research and reading books like The Body Keeps the Score or Waking the Tiger, which is about how stress and emotions live inside of your body, not just your mind, and they have to be processed somatically. And I began to see myself in the books that I was reading about him. And a lot of my childhood trauma started coming back to me as I was re-experiencing it in this high stress state of life. And so that led me into a long road of healing myself, of understanding somatics, of understanding how to process emotions at the level of the subconscious mind, and how to use applied neurology, not just to train your body for better athletic performance, but to re-regulate your nervous system so that you're not moving into these high stress states all the time. And then you're not getting the outputs of the unwanted behavior, the pain, the fatigue, the nausea, the migraine. And so I've learned how to help people identify the deficits in their nervous system, change the input, and then start to experience new outputs by stress processing somatically, training the nervous system, and then being able to work on beliefs, deep beliefs, limiting beliefs at the level of the body and the subconscious mind.
Wow. So many things, as you were talking, that just, he kind of, part of me wants to put my arms around you and hug you. The other part is like, oh my gosh, I know people are listening going, oh, I've experienced those things. I mean, just even at the point that you recognized I'd built this business on a foundation that just wasn't solid. And the only thing keeping it going was me running myself to complete exhaustion. And when I stopped, it fell apart. And part of you is like, oh, damn, that's proof that I needed to keep working. But it's also proof that I didn't build it the way that it was not only sustainable as a business, but it wasn't sustainable for me as a human being trying to exist.
Yeah, exactly. I had a lot of anxiety in my attachment styles that drove me into a lot of codependence, and not just in my love relationships, but in my work with my clients. And so I was regulating myself and trying to ensure my safety through that workaholism, and then getting stuck in this cycle of hypervigilance. And what happens when we get stuck there is that our hypothalamus is constantly pumping out then cortisol and adrenaline, which then makes your blood sugar go up all the time, right? Because it's preparing your body to fight or flee. So it's preparing that glucose to be released to your muscles. And that's fine in the short term if I was really being attacked by something. But in the long term, that is damaging. It damages the blood vessels and it damages the nerves, especially the vagus nerve, which controls our parasympathetic, our rest and digest system. So we start to really push ourselves into a lot of damaging health results when we stay in that state of chronic stress. But I couldn't get out of it because I was so trapped in my dysregulated nervous system already that I needed that to feel okay.
Yeah. You get addicted to it. And you don't know how to get by without it. And it's interesting because, there'll be people listening that'll say, okay, well, I haven't, owned my own business or lost a business or had to go through some of those other issues like caring for someone through cancer treatment. But I can guarantee you every single person listening right now has at some point in time been so stressed over work or their business that they didn't sleep for several days at the, just on the short end. That sense where you are, you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't stop thinking about what's next, or, worrying about that next meeting or that phone call or that performance review. And I think we've all
Absolutely.
been there. And some of us have, spent too much time there too. I did that many, many years of my life. And for me, the first time it manifested was when I was not even 30, and I had what was presenting as a heart attack. That I was, having severe chest pains. My left arm went completely numb. And next thing you know, I'm in the ER, and what later they told me is, well, luckily it's not your heart, but you have created so much stress that you've inflamed the lining of your chest cavity. And so the only thing your body knows how to do is demand your attention for it.
That's
And
right.
it took me 2 other times of that over the next 10 years before I finally went, you know what? At some point in time, this is going to be a heart attack if I
That's
don't
right.
change how I respond to things.
That's right. Because again, our body is always giving us these little signals, and it speaks quietly at first. If
Yeah.
it doesn't get your attention, it has to ramp up the volume and speak louder and louder until it gets you to change your behavior. So all of our behaviors and our outputs are really just our brain's best way to try to get us to change our behavior to keep us safe. That's our old brain, our back brain, and our cerebellum is its primary job is to ensure our survival. And so
Right.
everything that it's doing is for that. And absolutely, I feel like a lot of my experiences were very intense. And as far as like my trauma background, my childhood trauma is also pretty intense. But I feel like sometimes I was shown these things so intensely to be able to really see the pattern, to be able to see what's there so that I could learn about it and educate about it. But you certainly don't have to experience things that intensely to have those same kind of outputs. It can
Yeah.
be anything from just perceived neglect as a child, or even just a parent that says like, you're more trouble than you're worth, and those things get baked in, and then we feel guilty for our desires, or like
Yeah.
we're demanding too much of the world. And then most of us have been in a year at least of chronic stress
Oh
during the
God,
year
yes.
2020 with the pandemic and all of the social changes. And so everyone in the world is experiencing the stress of change right now,
Yeah.
plus health concerns and financial fears. And so it's
Yeah.
really important that we learn how to regulate that stress through our body, either through movement or applied neurology training, or something that allows you to express the emotions and to move through that stress cycle so that it doesn't get stuck in your body.
Well, I even think I was two stories that popped in my head, but not two stories, one story and one thing. But one thing I've been talking to people lately that kind of is running through my brain is that, we've spent the last year, just think, for instance, walking down the street with a mask on or without, whatever way you're walking down the street, but there's somebody walking towards you with a mask or without. We now have as a first response to cross the street or to step really wide. And it just, after a year of this, I don't care if they tell me that 100% of people in the entire planet, we've wiped out the pandemic, everybody's got the vaccine, it's never going to happen again. I think we've created new neural pathways that are going to still have us keeping ourselves away from people, because the last year we've been programmed to believe if I'm near someone, they might contaminate me or infect me.
Absolutely. What a powerful example that is. And
Yeah.
and how much that elevates the threat level of the nervous system just on a second by second basis.
Yeah.
And then it's, no wonder that people are starting to experience these outputs that they then feel guilt and shame about, like, oh, I've been overeating, or I've been drinking too
Yes.
much, or I've been whatever. And it's like, yes, because your brain is trying to figure out a way to get you to reduce your threat level. And for
Yeah.
me, like, binging became a really easy output for my brain to go to get me to change my behavior, because trained as an athlete, I would push through pain. I would even push through nausea. I would not listen to the other signals it was giving me, but if it would override me and have me kind of almost like blackout, go to the refrigerator, eat whatever was in there. I was too sick and too exhausted to keep going, and I would rest. And it was, our brain is thinking, if there's too much stimulus and too much threat, how can I get you to reduce the amount of stimulus that's coming in? How can I get you to go lay down, turn off the lights, be quiet and still? And maybe that's a migraine, maybe that's fatigue, maybe that's a binge, but it's your brain trying to reduce the amount of threat, because our central nervous system and our back brain understand that too much stress for too long leads to a chronically dysregulated nervous system, which causes disease, and it causes mental health issues. And so it's trying to get us to stop that. It's just our brain doing what it does.
Well, and I think one other thing too, before we stop quickly for the break, is that I had another guest that I was interviewing for this month, and she deals with a lot of trauma with, people way in their past. And she said, look, and this is to your point that you were making just a little bit. She goes, it doesn't mean that you have to have the traumatic childhood that I had, that had some horrible, horrible things. She said, I worked with a client who all he builds and, builds these $1 million businesses, and then he might lose it all again, or, he's never satisfied, or maybe he's got all the stuff and the toys, but he's just not happy. And so when she helped him finally get back to his childhood trauma moment was when he was so excited. He came home from school at kindergarten and showed his dad a picture and said, look, Dad, I colored between the lines. I didn't go out of the lines. And his dad said, doesn't look like you have much imagination, do you?
Absolutely.
And, that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, trauma is something different for all of us. Some of us have, some very serious trauma. Others have things that other people might go, well, that's not very bad, but it sticks with you. And those things that follow you through your life and keep you in that state of always a little discomfort can really have long-term effects when we don't go back and try and figure out what's that root cause.
Yeah, absolutely. Trauma is a physiological reaction, right? It's not necessarily an event, and it can be like acute trauma can be an event, but it's not even the event. It's the physiological sensations that you experience when something reminds you of the event. So if your throat gets tight, or your heart starts racing, or your shoulders round up into threat response, that's a trauma response, and that lives in your body. It doesn't live in our cognitive mind. As an adult, I'm sure that man knows, like, I do have imagination and I'm fine and I'm safe, even though my dad said that. So cognitively, in our prefrontal cortex, we can understand all of this, but it's our body that drives us into these behaviors. And that's where we feel it. That's where we feel the fear. And that's what holds us back.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsor, and we will be right back.
Awesome.
And we are back with Elisabeth Kristof. It's just fascinating. I'm really pleased that you shared your story, because you're right. Your story tells so much about why this is a passion project for you, but also proof of how, you are experiencing this on the positive side. So, if people are listening right now and they're like, this sounds like probably something that describes me or where I'm at right now. When somebody says, hey, maybe I want to work with Elisabeth and see if she's right for me, where do people start in that process, and how do you help them to begin to unwind through this process?
Yeah. So, well, I have a virtual platform. All the work that I do is virtual. All of my own coaches that I work with are virtual. And so I was already doing that prior to quarantine, because this work I've always wanted to train with people that were the highest and best in the field. And so I've always worked with people all over. So people would start by, we could do one-on-one work, or I also teach a lot of drills on my site where I start to teach people drills to stimulate different nerves, drills to train their visual system and their vestibular system. And most importantly, what you need to learn is how to be the expert of your own nervous system, how to assess and reassess so that you know if something is moving you in the right direction, because everybody's nervous system is unique. We're all very different. It's just this compilation, our neural network of our past experiences and our habits and the way we move regularly. So what may work really well for one person might be too much stimulus for you. So what you always need to do whenever you're doing neural training, and this is a good practice to implement really in all areas of your life, especially wellness areas, is to take an assessment and then reassess afterwards. So I would have them do something like test a range of motion. It could be as simple as turning your head side to side and seeing how far you see out of the corner of your eye to each side as you turn, or maybe standing up and doing some spinal rotation and like marking on the wall with your fingers, how far did I rotate to each side? Kind of close your eyes and look at what your fingers point to. And then we would do a neural exercise. So it could be as simple as doing some tongue circles. Tongue circles help stimulate your vagus nerve, which is your 10th cranial nerve. So you would just run your tongue over your teeth, trying to touch a little further back each time. And maybe do
Anybody
two
who's watching
circles.
the video is wondering what I'm doing.
Yeah, just like that. And you would do 2 circles in one direction, 2 in the other, and just give your vagus nerve some stimulus. And then you would reassess, and change at the level of the nervous system is lightning quick. So if you had a positive response, if it was the right kind of stimulus for your nervous system and your body, then your range of motion would actually get better. You would notice also too, maybe that your breathing would slow down. You would feel a release of tension in your muscles. When we're doing somatic work, you might feel that you would yawn or you would sigh. You want to look for these indications that your body is relaxing into this. You could also test it with an exercise. Like you could do a push-up before, do the neural exercise. And then if it's stimulus that your brain likes, the push-up will be easier afterwards. So you will know automatically if it's something that your body likes. And it's a really good idea to assess this with your exercise program as well, and see if you're training yourself into more pain, more fatigue. Or are you training yourself into more strength, more range of motion, more flexibility? Because it's not always the case that more exercise or that particular type of exercise is what your body needs. Then I also tell people test it with things like meditation too. Sitting still in a silent room with your eyes closed is not always the right kind of meditation for everyone. If you have a lot of trauma, maybe it would be better to take a really mindful walk, or to do a more neurosomatic meditation where you're grounding in your body. And you can actually tell how your nervous system responds to the meditation by assessing and reassessing afterwards. Test your range of motion, check out what your heart rate is, check out your respiration, and see if after the meditation it's better or it's worse, so that you know that you're moving yourself in a positive direction.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you give other ways for people to look at this too, not just because it's saying, hey, there are more than one ways, but also to show people that there may be multiple things that you can take advantage to help. And I just think about my own evolution with meditation. Is it started, I've done most of my stuff through guided meditation. And so I started with, little meditations that were only like 30 to 60 seconds. And then I got, where I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll have a little bit more. And I changed it, adapted. And now I do hypnosis meditation, guided hypnosis meditation on a daily basis. And I have 30 to 40 minutes of it. Sometimes it's when I go to bed. Sometimes it's in the middle of the day when I need to have kind of a refresher. Sometimes it's in the morning, an hour after I wake up, because I'm just not, all working. But it's interesting that you say that, because that within the first 3 breaths that I do when I'm just settling in, and it's still kind of the intro to that guided meditation, it's like I feel my entire body just get heavy.
Totally.
And it feels so wonderful, because it just feels like I'm not going to fly away with my thoughts, and I'm, nothing is going to harm me. I am rooted to this bed, because I always typically do it on the bed. And it's so when I started, I had great response to meditation in my life, when I started about 10 years ago, but now for the last 2 years doing this, and the evolution of where I am and how I feel about myself is so much better. But I also know that I'm at the point where I need something additional now. Like there's something, it's like I need to have something to liven it up again. So I think this is really intriguing, thinking, maybe I've relaxed my body to this point that I can try something even more intense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Our brain always needs novel stimulus to keep growing and changing. And it needs novel stimulus to give it fuel and activation. That's what our neurons want to stay alive. And so it's really important to keep expanding that. And I love that you started with just 3 minutes. I'm a huge believer in minimum effective dose to start. Something that doesn't push you into threat response, something that isn't, overwhelming. And so on my site, I actually have a free neurology 101 course, and we start with a morning practice that is 3 minutes a day, like doing a couple high payoff drills, doing a quick somatic meditation, and doing one thing for your respiration. And if you can just regulate, just spend 3 minutes a day starting to regulate your nervous system, you're actually going to be changing the threat level quite a bit overall. And then if you can put that in throughout the day, you're constantly bringing your stress level back down so that it stays at a new lower baseline. It doesn't have to be this huge undertaking of, every day for an hour, I trained my nervous system. It can be in these little bite-sized chunks that then you can apply throughout your day. Or for instance, apply before you do something that stresses you out. So like before I get on a podcast, as someone who has trauma in my life and is just learning to use my voice and be visible, I have to regulate my nervous system before I get on here. Because otherwise, what would happen is I would just push through that. I would push through that old belief. And then on the back end, I would get shut down with a migraine or with fatigue. And so before I do something like this, where I'm trying to embody this new belief as an entrepreneur that visibility is an act of service, and that using, my words and my work have value and serve the world. If I'm going to try to embody that new belief that's really uncomfortable for me, I need to regulate my nervous system with just a few drills, maybe just focusing on my breath with some nice long exhalations, maybe doing some tongue circles or a little bit of bouncing, and just bring my threat level down both before and after I do the stressful event, so that I'm not pushing myself and gradually increasing that threat level until I get into a dysregulated state, and then I get shut down.
Yeah. I mean, the sheer fact that, even after the pandemic's over, we know that a significant amount of business is still going to be conducted remotely because, businesses are going to have a tough time getting people back in, and there's just opportunities to reduce costs in a lot of ways. And that's the Zoom fatigue, is going around, but I think it's also that sense of, I'm so much more visible literally now than I ever was before. And that makes it more threatening. So something like that, even before going, having your team meeting on a Zoom call,
Absolutely.
could really put you in the right frame of mind.
Yeah, it really does. And what I try to do to bake in the new beliefs is I'll kind of deconstruct the beliefs I know that are limiting me, and then I have the new ones. But instead of just affirming something, I combine it with maybe tapping or some high payoff drills that my nervous system responds really well to, so that I'm relaxing my nervous system as I state the new belief, so that my body and my old brain are more open and receptive. If I'm giving my vagus nerve some stimulation and I'm in that parasympathetic state, then that belief is no longer threatening to my brainstem, to my body. And so I start to be able to change that belief really at the level of my subconscious mind and in my body, rather than just cognitively in my prefrontal cortex trying to push through.
Yeah, incredible. Boy, I could tell you, I could pick your brain on this all day long. I know we're going to have all of your information on our show notes, but in case somebody wants to look this up right now because they really want to find out how you may be their solution, what's the best way for them to find you?
The best way is through my website, brainbased-wellness.com. And if you go there, there's that free applied neurology 101 course that teaches you how to assess and reassess your nervous system, gives you a couple high payoff drills that I found work really well for a large number of my clients. And you can just start to experience the work and see, like, how does this feel for you? Is this a right fit? Is this something that I find useful? And then also, I would love to offer your listeners 2 free weeks if they want. So I'll send you the link to put that in the show notes.
That would be wonderful. I think that would be great. My listeners are very active, so it's great to know that that they really find value in these things, and especially a couple weeks trial will get them an opportunity to see what it means for them.
Yeah, I'd love to have them experience it.
Wonderful. Well, before we go, do you have any last words of wisdom or pearls of advice for my listeners and viewers?
I think the most important thing that I have learned through doing all of this, and no matter who I work with, is to just remember that our brains and our nervous systems are super malleable. We are always changing depending on the stimulus that we are giving in. Our bodies are always adapting to whatever we're giving it. And so we really have some agency over whether that change is positive or negative. And so if you feel like you're stuck in a behavior loop or in pain or in just a way of being that you don't want to be in, there are other ways besides trying to logic yourself out of that. And if that's not working for you, there's a whole system inside of your body and inside of your old brain that are able to also change. And so that change is possible and healing is possible. You just have to understand more about how it works.
Excellent. Well, thank you. This has been really fascinating. I appreciate your story. I appreciate what you do. And it's been an absolute
Thank
pleasure to
you
have you
so
on my
much.
podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Shock Your Potential podcast. Learn more about us today at shockyourpotential.com, including details on Michael's 2 best-selling books. Tell me more, how to ask the right questions and get the most out of your employees, and sales mixology, why the most potent sales and customer experiences follow a recipe for success. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and like us today.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Shock Your Potential. I am your host, Michael Sherlock. And as you know, all month long in the month of May, we are calling it Mindful May. And that's because it's important to not only be mindful of our, own mental health, which is our overriding theme for the month, but also to understand how mindfulness and meditation practices also may impact your sense of mental well-being. So my guest today is going to have a really unique perspective on this. Lauren Sanders is a business mentor for spiritual entrepreneurs, and she coaches them, that are those people who are ambitious and heart-driven, those that run their businesses and, know they're entrepreneurs, but they also have maybe something just a little more behind them. Now, at age 28, she left her career as a high school art teacher to begin this crazy life of entrepreneurship. And since then, she's been built 2 full-time businesses by implementing mindset, marketing, and manifestation strategies that actually work. And I know we've talked about similar themes in the past with other guests. I think this is going to be a really unique perspective. Her experience and massive success has allowed her to coach business owners all over the world and help them to make that transition, from side gig to full-time entrepreneurship. And as an entrepreneur herself, she's quadrupled her income as a teacher and lives a life of travel, freedom, and passion. She's lit up when providing ambitious business owners with the tools they need to make sure they can manifest that success and actually live lives on a day-to-day basis that they enjoy. So Lauren, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael. I'm really excited to be here.
I think, first of all, congratulations on quadrupling your income from being a high school teacher. I started my career as an elementary school teacher, and I know that the salary that I made was just not feasible for the lifestyle I wanted to have. Therefore, I'm no longer a school teacher either. So I know that there's a lot of passion between, for people who teach, but it's not always something that is able to, really manifest its way in other areas of your life. So congratulations on taking the big leap.
Yeah. In Canada, it's considered a pretty decent job, especially if you stay at it for 10 years, you're up at the top of the sort of pay grid, which is just short of 6 figures in most places. Which I wasn't anywhere close to, but it's still, so I had like what was considered a good job. And I was like, this still is not paying for the things that I want it to. Like, felt like it wasn't all financial for me, obviously, but that's always been a motivator for me. And as a business coach, I love talking to people about making more money if that's something they desire.
Absolutely. And I think mindset and manifestations are such an incredible part of this. It's something that's been a part of my entrepreneurship journey this time around. I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. I'm going back and forth between, the corporate America and, entrepreneurship. But this time around, this has been a huge part of what I have found for myself is successful as well. So I can't wait to learn more. So, I hit the highlights of your bio. Tell us a little bit more in your own words about what you do and how you help your clients to shock their potential.
Well, I love the name of your podcast because I do think we all have incredible potential that for the most part remains untapped for many of us. And I know that that's something that, we all feel on a deeper level, but just don't know what to do about necessarily. Mm-hmm. So yeah, as you said, I am a business mentor and coach for entrepreneurs. Predominantly, I work with people who have online businesses. So other coaches, course creators, content creators, just people that are building their brand online. And most of the time that is other coaches, like I said. And I'm very passionate about giving people the right tools in terms of marketing and, strategy. However, what I know to be true is that the role that our mindset plays and our energy plays trumps all of that. And even the marketing that we implement needs to feel aligned for us. What works for one person is not what's going to work for somebody else. So even within the more sort of masculine side of building a business, which is marketing and strategy, which I really am a fan of, it still needs to be, it's still hugely a part of the mindset side of business, because when you feel good about how you're putting yourself out there and you believe in your offers and in your services and you believe in yourself, you're going to market yourself differently than if not, right? And a lot of the time in the business world, it's this conversation of just do these things, just take out these ads and have this kind of opt-in and this kind of sales funnel and you'll make money. And clearly that's just not true, because otherwise everyone that had ever put a funnel in place would would be making $1 million, and
Right.
they're not because there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, you have to feel good about what you're doing without a doubt, and have confidence behind it. And it reminds me of a quick story that I probably have told before on the podcast, but I had like a consultation with someone who her services were something I was really considering. And I had met her, in a unique environment. I wasn't quite sure if she was the one to work with, but, I figured it was a consultation. It was the first time I was talking with someone in that space. And, so we started out, and I could tell that, the conversation, she had a pitch down, like somebody had said, here's the 10 steps to convert somebody in your, free consulting session to become a client, which I knew. I mean, I expected that, right? I'm not offended by that. I know what the deal is. But at one point in time, but I just felt like she wasn't comfortable. She wasn't comfortable in that process. And at one point in time, she shared her screen and showed me the, whatever, some questionnaire, and which of these would you choose? And which would these of you choose? And so when we got done with that, she forgot to turn off her screen sharing. So she continued on her pitch, and that rest of that page was the pitch, and I could see it. And I didn't have the heart to tell her, because I knew she was already not comfortable with it.
Right.
And it was just so painful. And it's such a hard story to tell, because I just wanted to say to her, you actually have something that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
And you have great expertise in this, but until you fix this, and I feel like today I should still call her and tell her this, but I haven't done it yet. 'Cause I'm like,
I like you, not your pitch.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But if you're not confident, it's that no matter who sold you the best, 10 steps to whatever, it's not going to work.
Well, and that's the thing. And I actually started my online business with something very similar to that. A coach that, walked you through her process. And part of that was a sales call. And it felt so uncomfortable to me, because I felt like instead of really being with the person, I was trying to remember the right things to say. And it's funny because I wasn't making any money in my business at that point. Whereas now I make a lot, and I don't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't really have, I believe in speaking to people powerfully about, what you have to offer, and being confident in how you can help them, and speaking to that. And I definitely do that in my marketing, but I don't have any kind of sales process. I really just believe that the right people are going to feel like they're going to know that they want to work with me. And all I have to do is show up for them. And I'm not even interested if I have to convince someone to work with them because I said all the right things and they were on the fence, but then I said something at the right time, and that was the reason they spent, lots of money to work with me. That doesn't feel authentic to me. I would rather have someone who's like a heck yes than a, yeah, I guess so. Right.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting because being on in your experience on the other side of that, if she had just shown up and said, hey, this is how I can help you, it would have been a completely different thing. Right.
Yeah.
Like if she had just shown up and really believed in what she was offering, and that her time was worth your money and your investment, then it would have gone completely differently. But what that really says to me was just she had a real lack of self-trust.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Which we all start with, especially as business owners.
Sure.
But yeah, so good story.
On the flip side, I also had a woman that I interviewed that's actually for our series this month in March, and because it's all about marketing. And I was really impressed with her, what she does in terms of some Facebook advertising and that type of thing. And we have not advertised anything yet. There's a couple of things that we want to do. And so my director of marketing and I met with her and had a meeting. And what so impressed me is, to your point, she showed up with what she does. She was passionate about it, but she was also realistic with us and said, look, here, to do what you want to do, you actually need to be to this number of engaged followers on your Facebook page. Because if this is what you're trying to achieve, you need to do this. And I would encourage you to build that first before working with me. And it was it was such a wonderful interaction. So we've been working on that strategy. We're getting closer to it. But as soon as we are there, we'll definitely work with her, because she showed up, and to have somebody say, look, I'm happy to work with you, but you're not ready for me yet. And here's what you need to do to accomplish it for this one specific goal. And I was like, wow, now that's incredible. Yes. That's powerful stuff.
She literally said, don't give me your money yet. And the result was, I want to give you all the money. When can I work with you? Take it.
I know, I'm like, but I want to give it to you now because I believe in you. Okay, we'll do the other hard work first for that part. but yeah, it creates an environment. So when you talk about working, with spiritual entrepreneurs, what do you mean by
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, I believe very strongly in manifestation on different levels. It's not so much a spiritual thing for me. Well, it's kind of become that way. In the early days, I really dove into the world of quantum physics and understanding, how our thoughts are so intrinsically linked to the reality that we experience. It's really like once you start getting into it, it's really not something that you can deny. Whereas as earlier on, like I used to be someone that just believed very much in like happenstance, some people got lucky and some people didn't. And once I started understanding like the science behind manifestation, it really made it available to me. And from there, I started embracing more of the spiritual side. For me, when I talk about, working with spiritual entrepreneurs, that's like working with people who are very much in their soul's purpose and mission in the way that they help people, right? And doing things in a way that feels good to them, leading with their intuition, because my intuition is the reason I am where I am today. I've trusted it over everything. I've learned to trust it more and more. And even, I have a coach who I love and she's amazing and she's doing incredible things in her business, but she might tell me to do something and I still will always go with what feels right to me. And sometimes that's exactly what she's told me to do. And sometimes it's not, right? So working with spiritual entrepreneurs, a lot of the time people that I'm working with are talking about mindset and manifestation with their clients. But more than that, it's just, I'm working with people who know that that they are a part of something much bigger, that they can rely on the universe or on life or on God, whatever resonates with you. I don't care. I often talk about the universe and allowing the universe to show up for you. And, so that's, I work with people who understand just how powerful their thoughts and their mindset are in creating their reality and are wanting to learn how to leverage their energy to create a life that they love.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important to recognize how much, it comes back to the old adage of, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Exactly. Yes.
But I think it's really exciting to me that where we are in the world today, that there's so many more people that are open to realizing that they, in terms of meditation or mindfulness practice, or I do a lot of hypnosis meditation now, the things that get your mind in alignment with your goals and your mind in alignment with, your where you are at the moment, and trying to, use that opportunity to bridge you to the next level. But it makes me think about even when like the book and the movie The Secret came out, there are either people that went all in and they're like, I completely believe everything of that, or they said, I don't believe any of that. It's all smoke and mirrors or snake oil salesmen. And at least now I think people
there's a middle
understand
ground.
that. There's just a lot there that we can access. You just have to start by opening your mind a little.
And like, I am happy to explain manifestation in a very logic-based way in terms of the way that the brain works. The brain searches for evidence of whatever it is that you're thinking about. It finds ways to get you to what you are focusing on. So, even just understanding the way that the brain works, if you are focusing on what you want in your business, in your life, in your career, your brain's going to show you the way there. You're going to be literally open and receptive to the opportunities coming your way. Whereas if you're focusing on, things aren't going well for me, or I'm not making any money, or clients don't want to work with me, you're going to gain evidence for that. And that's going to become your reality as well. So I really do believe in the whole energetic side of things, but even for people that don't, you can't afford to not pay attention to just how important your mindset is. And then on top of that as well, the level of belief you have in yourself dictates how you show up as well. When I really believe in what I'm promoting, I'm going to promote it more. I'm going to promote it with more confidence. I'm going to come across as just someone filled with conviction around what she has to offer. When I'm questioning myself, it's another story, right? So I don't need people to believe in manifestation if that's, because I was like, I watched The Secret and was like, okay, like that sounds nice. I don't think so. I was the latter for sure. And I've obviously, come around. But I think that, we can allow ourselves to embrace it at whatever. I'm not like a big crystals person. I don't burn sage and stuff. It's just not who I am. Right. Whereas I have friends they pick their cards every single morning and they chant 3 times and all the things, and that's what works for them. So, I think we need to allow ourselves to embrace whatever level of mindset or spirituality or energy work, that resonates with you.
Yeah, I agree. And it can be different. It can be just something as simple as somebody taking a walk and just saying, I've got to go clear
Absolutely.
my head. I love it when people are like, oh, no, I don't do any of that, but I go running. Well, so what do you do when you're running? Well, it's my time
Right.
to have a clear head. Well, guess what? That's not
Exactly.
a whole lot different than me sitting down to do a meditation. It's just,
Exactly. Absolutely.
you're burning more calories than I am.
Yeah. Oh, like there's been times in my business when I'm really like, attached to something, like I'm in a launch and I feel like it's not going well, or I'm attached to working with a certain person. And the first thing I do is go for a walk and go, I'm so, fortunate. I have so much to be grateful for. And that just has me zoom out from the whole thing. And it's such a powerful practice for, whatever reason you're doing it for.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think that I've lost, at least because I live in downtown Philadelphia, and prior to, the pandemic, my husband's office is 1.1 miles away. And so most every morning I would get up and I'd walk him to the office, and then I'd have, a mile on my way home just of me. And then
Right.
he would often walk home without me. So we each had, a mile together to walk and a mile of our own time, either before or the end of the day, and I miss that. And now that it's actually finally not, Arctic here, we actually got out and went for a run this morning. And it was so great to start the day with a run or a walk, that space that I think I've really lost an entire year of not having a mile, 5 days a week. That's just that. This is just me and my head time. Jumped into work. I can feel the weight of that after so long.
Yeah, for me, it's been, not a lot shifted for me in terms of my workflow and stuff like that, because I did work from home, but I used to really rely on going to coffee shops, especially during the winter. I live in Toronto, so it's also Arctic. And I just loved, going and being around people and feeling the inspiration. And I would sit at my computer for a few hours and I would just be so intentional. And there's been multiple times where I got to the point where it was like, I have a very beautiful 2-bedroom apartment. I have so much more than what a lot of people have in terms of my home space. But there's still been times when I'm like, I just can't look at these walls anymore. Like I have no inspiration, So I think it's affected different people in different ways. And something as simple as a morning walk, like that absolutely would affect your mindset, especially over a long period of time as it's been.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll hear from our sponsor and we'll be right back. And we are back with Lauren Saunders and talking about so many important aspects that I believe in very fully, and especially with having the right mindset for your business. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. Definitely have had my road bumps with it.
There is no such thing as perfect.
Yeah, that is so true. Yeah. And that's true. Yeah. And if we think, it's kind of like when people say, oh, I can't meditate. I've tried it and it didn't work for me. I'm like, that's why they call it a practice. It's not a succeed. It's a practice.
The way that I say it to people is like, if you go to the gym, there's some days when you are on fire and you just feel so good. And then there's other days where it felt heavy the whole time, but you still went to the gym. Like you still moved your body. It was still worth your time.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not about perfection. It's about doing it. I agree. And I think, all month long, I'm tying, this issue back to our mental health as well. So I know we've talked a lot about success in business, which I'm a firm believer in. What do you think the role of, mindfulness and really being, kind of putting those thoughts out into the world, what does that do you think, to our mental health and sense of overall well-being just for us personally?
In regards to, can you reframe the question for me?
Yeah, just thinking about mindfulness and manifestations, we've been talking a lot about, kind of that role in business and success, but, what do you see it as, a benefit for somebody, not just in their business, but just for them personally as well?
Oh, I think it's so important. I mean, for me, having my business really brings me back to doing my mindset work because I'm, a very goal-oriented person. But I think that mindset is a topic for every human being on the planet. And one of the things that has been coming up a lot lately in terms of conversations that I've had, in terms of kind of what I'm feeling led to work towards, that I think is a very relevant and important conversation for anybody, is the idea of acceptance of our emotions. And because a lot of the time when we're talking about mindset, it's within this idea that there's things to change, right? I feel anxious today and I don't want to feel anxious. I need to feel happy. And it's this constant conversation that we're in with ourselves and with other people around why the way that we feel isn't the way that we should feel. When in reality, if we could instead change the story that we have about our emotions and stop making them wrong, there's an immense amount of freedom in that. There's a great book called The Ultimate Key to Happiness. And essentially the takeaway of it is it's not the emotions themselves that we feel, it's the story that we have about them. And if you're watching a movie that's, say, very suspenseful and you're feeling really anxious watching it, at the end of the movie, you're like, wow, that was great. That was an amazing movie. I felt, I was on the edge of my seat my entire time. And we actually enjoy the feeling of anxiety. I mean, it depends what kind of movies you're into, because it was, I do. Anyways, I love a thriller because it's an emotional roller coaster that you actually enjoy going on. Whereas when it's in our own lives, we have a story about our emotions that make them unpleasant, right? I'm feeling anxious about this. And that means that I am a failure, or I shouldn't be. This is a bad emotion. This is a good one. And I only want to feel the good ones. But if we could instead view all emotions through more of like a neutral observance, really, where it's like, I have anxiety today. I'm a human being. There's a pandemic going on. Of course I do. Yeah. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like I think there's a lot to be said about that. And that's really been transformative for me. Instead of this trying to climb my way out of a way that I don't want to feel anymore, to just be with it, I find that it usually passes a lot faster, because what you resist persists. So if you're resisting your emotions or your thoughts or whatever, you're just feeding more and more energy into them, right? Whereas if you're just kind of observing them and going, I'm having these kinds of thoughts today. Okay, doesn't have to mean anything. They're just there. I'm a human. That's normal. They're going to just naturally, stick around for as long as they're meant to, and then they're going to leave. So I don't know if that answers your question, but in terms of mindset on a more like general level for everybody, that's something I would say it's just been coming up a lot lately.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. Take it as more of an observer. In fact, it reminds me, I had a guest several months ago, and we were talking about similar things about the way we beat ourselves up for, our emotions or our thoughts, or, getting stuck on something from the past. And she goes, next time you hear yourself saying those things, say them out loud as if you're saying them to someone else. And you'll realize that you would never talk to anybody else the way you talk to yourself in your own head. And I went, wow, you're right. I mean, we're so much more kind and caring towards others. If somebody comes to you and says, I'm really, I suck at my business, everything's, it's just, I'm not doing anything right. It's good. You're not going to say you're right. You suck.
You're absolutely right.
Come on.
Yeah.
Look at what you are doing. We boost each other up, but we tear ourselves down pretty easily.
Yeah. And if someone did come to me and say that, I wouldn't jump into trying to change their mind right off the bat, because what they need is for someone to understand where they're at, right? They need to feel acknowledged and heard, because if they're in that mindset, that's very real for them at that time. Right. And so if we could do the same things for ourselves, where it's like, hey, I see where you're at right now. I understand that's uncomfortable for you, but just know that it's okay that you're there. That's like, it's that validation or that acknowledgement just gives us permission to be like, oh, okay, great. Like communication strategy for anyone listening is just when someone comes to you with something, especially coaches, we tend to go right into this place of wanting to give advice. But what that person really needs first and foremost is just for someone to hear them, right? Because if someone says, hey, I'm dealing with this, I'm really struggling right now. And you go, oh, well, have you tried meditating or going for a walk or doing that? It's helpful, except that they just really need first and foremost to feel like they're not alone in it. Right. And I know what I'm often left with when someone tries to give me advice right away that I wasn't necessarily asking for, is that they didn't quite hear me. Right. Or I'm still left with it. So anyways, I find that when I let people know, hey, I know that must be really hard for you. I'm sorry that you're going through that. Then I can quickly, let them know what I might do in that situation. And they're open to it at that point.
Yeah, you can say like, I have some suggestions and
Yeah,
strategies. Would you like to talk about those?
exactly.
And they may say, yes, absolutely. Or they might say, no, I'm not ready for that. I've tried everything.
Yeah,
Okay, well then, let's just deal with
that's where
where
they
you
need to
are
be.
right now.
Exactly. And imagine we treated ourselves that way as well.
Exactly. And I think that's been the fun part of all my guests so far this month is really this sense of just giving ourselves a break, especially coming out of a pandemic, is to understand we are all going to have some long-term scars
Oh,
from this.
yeah.
And we're going to have to watch for them because they're going to creep up in ways that I think we don't even recognize. Because I think everybody thinks, well, once we're all vaccinated, we can all run around again, life will be great. Well, that's not necessarily going to be the
Yeah.
case.
I think there's still going to be a lot to unpack. And it is interesting because I've
Yeah.
had lots of clients and even like my mom saying, I just don't know why I feel so anxious right now. My mom
Yeah.
a few weeks ago was going, I'm retired now and I used to have such a high stress job and now I'm anxious. And I'm like, are you aware that there is a global pandemic going
Yeah.
on and that it makes perfect sense that we would have anxiety at the current moment in time?
Yeah.
And it's like, we're just so quick to be like, oh, I feel this way and that's wrong. And I shouldn't
Right.
be, right? I shouldn't
Right.
be feeling this way because I'm retired, because I'm just sitting around at home. It's like, well, I
That
know
would
for
make
me,
me anxious.
yeah, I have more anxiety than I ever did before because I'm sitting around home. There's not a lot of places to go. You can't go and connect with people, and so just having
Yeah.
compassion for yourself, I really think is such a huge part of it.
I agree. And I think I can really see how in your work with other coaches as well, that, helping them to embrace this, not only kind of giving themselves a break, but also using some true practices towards manifestations that they can see. Well, it kind of trains the brain in a way
Yeah,
of positive
exactly.
outlooks and positive outcomes that can come from that.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're going to have all your contact information on the show notes, but just in case somebody wants to look you up right now because they say, I want to know how to work with this incredible woman, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, so I do a lot on Instagram. I'm at Lauren C. Saunders, and it's also my website, laurencsaunders.com. I have 2 podcasts. One that is for entrepreneurs. It's called the Aligned Entrepreneur Podcast. And then I have one that I co-host with a girlfriend of mine, and it's more mindset, self-development, manifestation, just in general. And it's called the Lo and Zo Show. So those are my main spaces online.
I love it. Well, before we go, do you have any last words of wisdom or pearls of advice for my listeners and viewers?
Pearls of advice: thoughts become things. So, allow yourself to spend some time each day, either through a scripting practice, a journaling practice, or I like to do visualizations, vision boards, where you're just allowing yourself to play around in, the potential of things that you desire to create for yourself in your life. That's how it all started for me. I never thought I was going to have a business. I was just playing around in possibility and not taking life too seriously, allowing myself to explore. And, 5 years later, I have a very different reality as a result.
I love it. Lauren, thank you so much for being my guest today. I think you have some great insight, and I'm very glad that we've been able to share it with my audience.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael. And thank you to your audience for having me.
Absolutely.